Welcome to the Brian A. Joyce Report. I'm Senator Brian Joyce, and we've had some guests recently that were from outside the political realm. I think we had the architect from Fenway Park describing the changes being made there. We had some folks talking about our aging population, but we do need to get back to our roots here. I am, after all, a politician, and we have to interview some of the extraordinarily important people in our state government. And today we have one of the most important people in our state government, and also a very, very good guy, the Lieutenant Governor, Tim Murray. Welcome.
Good to be with you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Terrific. Well, I'm going to give a little bio here, and I know Tim, but I want to make sure I hit all the high points here. I mentioned to you earlier that my neighbor and your partner in crime, the governor, Deval Patrick, sat on that couch about, I think it was about 3 years ago, 2.5 to 3 years ago, and for the very first time ever announced his candidacy. And it was at a time when an awful lot of people couldn't pronounce his name and had never heard of him. And frankly, an awful lot of people outside of Worcester hadn't heard of you.
Right.
And
right.
now, look at you now. Look at you now. Tim was elected Lieutenant Governor on November 7th, 2006, and sworn in on January 4th, 2007. He works very closely with our governor on the important issues facing our Commonwealth, including economic development, healthcare, taxes, and the environment. Tim also serves, the Lieutenant Governor serves as the administration's liaison to our cities and towns. So if there's a particular issue involving, the town of Canton, for example, the Lieutenant Governor gets involved and works with Representative Galvin and myself. You also chair 6 councils, including the Governor's Council, where, interestingly, we have a race. I think 7 of the 8 governor's councilors are being challenged this year in the Democratic primary. We have the Governor's Advisory Council on Veteran Services, and I know that the Lieutenant Governor has been a real champion of veteran services, and we want to talk about that. And also the Interagency Council on Homelessness and Housing. Prior to his election as Lieutenant Governor, Tim served in the Worcester City Council since 1997 and became mayor of that city in 2001, serving 3 terms. Tim's a Worcester native and the oldest of 5 children. He attended the Worcester Public Schools before earning his bachelor's degree from Fordham University and his law degree from the Western New England College School of Law in Springfield. Tim lives in Worcester with his wife and 2 beautiful young daughters. So how's that for an intro? Is that pretty good?
All right. Thank you.
So I'm sorry I didn't have it memorized, but it's
No.
terrific to have you here. I've been very impressed with your work on a number of issues, and I just want to first just hear from you. And how do you like the job?
Thanks. No, it's been great. You work hard to get elected, win the primary, and then you work hard with the governor to win in November. And through a lot of hard work, support from people like you, and I believe you were the first state senator and probably one of the first elected officials to support then candidate for governor, Deval Patrick. And so, I really feel that now in a year and a half on the job, we've got some momentum going. People often analyze the role that the lieutenant governor has or doesn't have, but I've been lucky. The governor and I personally get along well. You have a seat at the table as lieutenant governor from the viewpoint of having served as the mayor of Worcester and a city councilor, and also when I was mayor chairing the school committee. There's a natural connection with a lot of the municipal officials and some of the struggles that they've been feeling with over the last several years. So one of the things that roles that I've been more than happy to play is to try to be that liaison, make sure that all the elected officials know that in the corner office with the governor and myself, you've got somebody they can pick up the phone and call in the executive branch, and someone who is willing to try to get them answers. Can't always get the answer that people want, but at the end of the day, it's about government working together at different levels to deliver services effectively and efficiently, and that's what we're trying to do.
I remember a former Governor Dukakis was a guest here on the show during the campaign when you and Deval Patrick were running for governor and lieutenant governor. And I remember former Governor Dukakis talking about going back to the grassroots. And he talked about, in his campaigns, he had an awful lot of backyard meetings, barbecues, small dollar fundraisers, and the like. And, I'm a great admirer of Governor Dukakis, but I thought he was kind of talking about a bygone era. And yet you've done that. It seems that you and Governor Patrick have really tried to go back to grassroots. I see a lot of community meetings throughout the state. We just had one in Milton a week ago or so. So I want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think you're right, Brian. It's absolutely kind of back to the future. As much as technology is playing an increasingly important role in campaigns and the computer and the internet with fundraising and email, as being the way to do constituent work, it has changed in many ways. But people, I still think, clamor for that contact, that direct contact, getting bombarded with 7 or 8 pieces of mail in the last week of a campaign. You hear the commercials over and over again. It kind of numbs people. And so I think it is important, not only in campaigning but in governing, to try to continue to have those connections. And as you know, all of us in government, I learned it at City Hall, you've learned it at the State House, it's very easy to get isolated within the building, whether it be the State House or City Hall, to kind of the internal politics of the building and who did what to who, and caught up just in trying to do your job of pushing a piece of legislation or through the process. That can sometimes become all-consuming.
Sure.
And I think what we've tried to do is be disciplined enough to get out of the building. As much as you got to pay attention to what happens in the building, you got to also pay attention to what's happening outside. It's being at the coffee shops, it's talking to people, giving them a chance to express their concerns, their complaints, so you don't, you stay fresh and on top of things.
And I think what's also quite clear is that you are, if not a co-governor, certainly a close colleague and co-worker of the governors. I think, as I recall, it was Governor Weld that kind of changed the model and had then Lieutenant Governor Paul Cellucci as essentially a partner, and it was a collaborative effort, and each brought strengths and weaknesses. We didn't necessarily see that under Mitt Romney, but we see that again, where both you and Deval Patrick bring certain skill sets, and I think that inures to our benefit. And your skill set, among others, it seems to me, dealing with the municipalities, with the cities and towns, in that the selectmen in Canton or in Stoughton or in East Bridgewater or wherever know that you've faced some of those same local issues and fiscal constraints. So I think that has been well received.
Well, it's important because at the end of the day, it's local government where the rubber meets the road. It's local government that primarily delivers the services that people in our cities and towns rely on a day-to-day basis. So it is important that we be responsive, look for partnership opportunities. We've, I think, assembled a team. Bob Nunes, who is the 4-time mayor of Taunton, is our director of local services and deputy commissioner over at the Administration of Finance. So we've tried in different ways to make sure that we're being responsive. And as you said with the governor, he's been great. I do feel like I'm a partner. At the end of the day, the decisions are the governor's, as they should be, but he's someone who wants people to give their honest opinions. He wants someone who he solicits, whether it be me or the cabinet, what are the pros and cons, and that, I think, ultimately is a sign of a good leader. And I think when you solicit that type of feedback, pros and cons, and have all the information, you make better informed decisions. And one thing the governor is not afraid of is making decisions, which is something we don't always see in the corner office.
Well, it's interesting in that people did, I think, want an outsider, wanted some folks like Deval Patrick, like Tim Murray, that had not been in state government to come in with a fresh perspective. And the perception was, when this administration started, when your administration started, it got off to a little bit of a slow start, that there was a learning curve. Honestly, my observation is that perception was accurate, in that there was a learning curve. But what I've seen, now you've been in office about a year and a half, it appears that this administration is hitting on all cylinders, that we've just passed, I think, 7 bond bills, to everything from transportation to the environment. You had an extraordinary success in the Life Sciences Initiative, which had a direct impact right here in Canton, by the way. You've had a whole string of successes. The perception has not really caught up with the reality of, frankly, just how good this administration is doing. So, I mean, what's your response to that? And I'll tell you, honestly, I do think when you started, there was some learning in it, and I think that's to be expected.
Well, Brian, I was literally trying to figure out the phone system the first month or two, and you're trying to get into a routine, and right off the bat, when you're sworn in, your first task is to prepare a budget. and we not only had to prepare a budget, but deal with kind of the figures that we had gotten, which weren't completely accurate from the previous administration, and walked into a $1 billion hole. So he really focused on the budget, and clearly, as the governor has said, that there are some things that we all wish we could have done differently. I think, but I think we focused on the fundamentals, getting the budget right, putting together a package to help cities and towns with the Municipal Partnership Act, and really start to put together a plan. And you mentioned the 7 bond bills. I was at a leadership meeting a couple months ago, and every Monday, as you know, the Speaker, the Senate President, House and Senate Ways and Means Chair, myself and the Governor sit and talk about, work on an agenda each week about where different issues are, pieces of legislation, and how do we move them along. A couple of months ago, I asked the Speaker, I said, have you ever seen this many bond bills work their way through the process at once? And the reason I posed a question to the Speaker is he's been there 30 years. And he's had some institutional memory. He said, no, it's unprecedented. Now, these bond bills are not always the things that are going to be the front page of a newspaper. They're not going to lead at 6. It's not going to light up talk show radio lines, but it's those fundamental things, what I call the blocking and tackling of government, that are important to cities and towns. It's the roads and bridges. It's the higher ed bond bill, which you know is important and you advocated for as we're at Massasoit Community College. It is the environmental bond bill, which is about our parks and our beaches and open space, which you know in your district with the Blue Hills. And so it's the life sciences, a piece of that was the bond bill. We've got the broadband bond bill. We've got parts of the state, Senator, that have no broadband internet access, especially in the 4 western Mass counties of Berkshire.
Let me try to bring that, put a local angle on that. So here in Canton, there's a company called Organogenesis that is just an extraordinary company that makes, among other things, artificial skin. That's what, when people talk about life sciences or biotech, that's what they're talking about, this kind of new science, which has extraordinary applications to improve and indeed extend the quality and the length of our lives. So this company makes this artificial skin that burn victims or people with ulcers, and et cetera, find invaluable. And they were being courted by states all over the country and indeed by nations all over the world. And through this initiative from the Patrick Murray administration, that company is going to stay and build their world headquarters here in Canton. They're going to triple their workforce with an average wage in excess of 66, or in excess, I guess now, of $70,000. That is truly extraordinary in the type of jobs that we want to keep and retain and grow in Massachusetts to improve and keep this standard of living. That's what I think the administration is doing now, and the message isn't necessarily getting out. I think it's easier for the media to be critical, and you're right, some of the bond bills aren't necessarily sexy or exciting. Britney Spears' latest escapade leads the news, but I'll tell you, you guys are doing a good job.
No, well, we do it alone, and the life sciences and biotech, clearly people like yourself and your colleagues were able to make that thing. So it's something that can keep jobs now. There are opportunities to grow Massachusetts' preeminent position in life sciences and biotech around the state. And it's about jobs, not only at the high end, but the median wage is important. When you talk about a researcher, a doctor, he or she, that PhD, needs a team of people. Sure. And there's a range of salaries and a range of skill sets required. So it's a big jobs multiplier.
I think it was Tip O'Neill who said the first, second, and third most important things about politics are jobs, jobs, and jobs. So we're doing some good work in that area. We're going to take a quick break and come back in a few minutes with the Lieutenant Governor, Tim Murray.
Over here. Did you know that the first person to fly faster than the speed of sound was Chuck Yeager back in 1947? No. I didn't think so.
It's fun to know history. Find curious facts from America's past at loc.gov, the Library of Congress website.
Welcome back to the Brian A. Joyce Report, and with me today is our Lieutenant Governor, Tim Murray. And I just told him during the break we're going to touch on the 4 or 5 issues that I hear about the most. and we're not going to pull any punches. So we have taxes. People are talking to me about taxes and their tax burden all the time. Healthcare, high cost of healthcare. What are we doing about it? Education. I'd actually go over to veterans and what are we doing for our veterans given the current situation in Iraq? And then why don't we end with politics, and I'll try to probe you a little bit on your political future. So taxes, I'm against them.
Yeah,
Everybody's against
everyone's
taxes,
against them.
and yet everybody wants more of their particular
services
spending.
and things. Our approach has been, and the governor has said this. The approach of our administration is, let's try to find efficiencies, make government work better with the dollars that we've gotten. And I think that's been the major focus that we've taken in our administration. There were a lot of accomplishments, I think, in the first legislative session. There is a piece of unfinished business, though. We've put several ideas on the table to the legislature on property tax relief, and whether it be in the Municipal Partnership Act, giving cities and towns the ability to close loopholes that they could then dedicate for property tax relief, in particular the telecommunications loophole. You have large companies like Verizon and others not paying property taxes, yet people on fixed incomes, families trying to send their kids to school.
So Verizon, the phone company, the old New England Telephone, now Verizon, is not paying property taxes to cities and towns for having lines on the poles.
And equipment.
But the cable company, or their equipment, but the cable company is.
Right.
So that was one of the changes you wanted to make.
And our point was back in 1920 when they gave the then fledgling phone industry a tax incentive, a tax break to encourage them or incentivize them to bring phone service to throughout the state. That made sense at the time.
Sure.
But we think that they should be paying their fair share, and then cities and towns can use that money to hopefully relieve people's tax burden.
The ubiquitous service they were striving for in the 1920s was accomplished certainly
I think
before 2008.
as the governor said, mission accomplished. And so I think that's
Be
one.
careful, I just want to have that
Right.
banner behind him.
Well, that's one loophole. I mean, I think we can close. The other piece, very controversial, and took a lot of the oxygen out of the room, is the whole casino plan.
Right.
We were proposing using a significant portion of that casino revenue for direct property tax relief to, I think it would have been over 100,000 households across the state, probably about a couple $100. And then there are other parts of the Municipal Partnership Act that we felt could help cities and towns provide services but take pressure off the property tax that have still yet to come out of the House Revenue Committee, and we're going to continue to push.
Well, the interesting thing, when people talk about whether we should have gambling in Massachusetts, we already do.
Yep.
We had the lottery pass in 1970s through a popular referendum, and people are shocked when I give them some statistics that, the state of Connecticut receives about, I think, $500+ million from Foxwoods and the Mohegan Sun. And I'll say, how much do you think we're getting in Massachusetts from our state lottery? And people say, I don't know, 50 million, 20 million. We're getting over $900 million from our state lottery. So we already have gambling in Massachusetts. There is a question as to whether we want to expand it and become further dependent on that revenue source. But I appreciate that the administration's both looking for new sources of revenue, other than just going back and taxing people, because folks are already overburdened right now with high food costs, fuel costs, gasoline, everything, healthcare, prescription drugs. And second, looking to gain efficiencies. I mean, there was one bill that I was most proud of, my sponsorship of, the Equal Choice Bill, which gives our seniors, for the first time ever, a choice to receive up to that same level of care in the comfort and dignity of their own home that they were previously only eligible to receive in a nursing home. But the interesting thing is, not only is that what our seniors want, it saves a ton of dough. It's, $10,000, $11,000 for home care versus $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year for a nursing home. So there are further things I think we can do, and I appreciate the administration working with me to try to professionalize the management of the Ponkapog Golf Course here, rather than costing the state $35, $36 million to improve, to hopefully generate as much as in excess of $100 million if we can professionalize the course in management and improve it, get a private investor, and attract a USGA event, a PGA event here that could generate. So the administration has, to its credit, been looking to both streamline government, try to be more efficient, and grow new revenues. We don't always agree on the approaches, but I appreciate the effort.
No, and that's, I think if you're going to make the case for revenue, and there may be a point in time where that happens, you've got to say we've taken the requisite steps to squeeze the dollar that we've been given already.
I think I'm the only Democrat left in the Senate that's never voted for a tax increase, a little known fact. The second point I wanted to talk about healthcare. The cost of this very ambitious universal health plan we have in Massachusetts are even more than we anticipated. Are we going to be able to sustain it?
Well, that's a question that's hard to answer. A lot of it's going to depend on what happens with the federal waiver. During the transition after the governor and I were elected, at a series of meetings and press conferences, we were asked, what will be the biggest challenge that this administration has? And there were many challenges, but clearly one of the biggest challenges out of the gate was the implementation of the Health Care Reform Act. And the good news is 350,000 people who previously did not have health insurance have health insurance now, which is important, and we really believe over time will save the system money, because when you're treating people in the front end, you save money at the back end. So, but the thing is this federal waiver, and when the legislature and the business community, the hospitals, the health insurance providers, the consumer advocates struck the deal on health care reform, the federal government was at the table and they made a commitment. Unfortunately, the Bush administration is backing away from that commitment. Haven't finalized what they're actually going to be prepared to do in terms of honoring that Medicaid waiver. If they are able to honor it, we think we can continue to move this thing and try to manage it.
But it's a real challenge.
But it's a real challenge, and if they don't, Brian, we're going to have to revisit,
Right.
the timelines that maybe people envisioned of when there'll be full access to health care for everybody and affordable access.
Fair enough, and I appreciate your candor. And really the issue has always been the failure of the federal government to act with respect to providing basic insurance to all, and adequate insurance to all Americans. And because of that failure to act, I think the state, in this instance really our state, led the effort, Massachusetts stepping in, but it's cost prohibitive or may be cost prohibitive, so stay tuned on that issue.
But just on that, I mean, and quickly, I give the Bush administration credit a couple of years ago. I mean, their initial approach with some of the players in the Bush administration were, if we want to talk about this healthcare issue, which is choking everybody across the country and private sector and the public sector, is let the states be our laboratories of innovation, and let's give them some flexibility and tools. And that was the spirit in which we ventured down this path in Massachusetts. Now they're backing away from that commitment, and that's unfortunate.
For those of you who have been around a few years, it's Back to the Future, and that I think when President Truman left office, he said his greatest regret was not passing some sort of national, solution for this healthcare problem. And my gosh, here we are 60 years later, and the problem's only worse. Next issue, education. Three things in education. First, with respect to higher education, administration's done some great things trying to improve our college campuses, University of Massachusetts and other state colleges and community colleges. Second, I really appreciate the administration's effort to shore up the student loans. I have 2 children going off to college this year. I can tell you firsthand, for a lot of families, you just have no idea where you're going to come up with this money. And when the Mass Educational Finance Agency announced it didn't have a market for its bonds, and as a result, some 40,000 Massachusetts families were not going to have access to those low-cost student loans. I appreciate it. I lobbied a group. We got 39 senators to sign a letter to the governor and to yourself, Lieutenant Governor, and you guys responded. I got to tell you, honestly, Tim, I was incredibly disappointed in the response of the Treasurer, Tim Cahill. I think he missed an opportunity to invest some of our pension funds at a very good return and put it to good work. We have a $51 billion state pension fund, and I tell you, I think the Treasurer missed a big opportunity, but I appreciated your leadership on that issue.
Well, on the education piece, we've put a lot of deferred maintenance. We literally have libraries falling down at our higher, Salem State closed their library. We have labs that are 30 and 40 years old, a garage at UMass Boston, for example, that's falling down. Between the 29 state colleges and community colleges, we have some real deferred maintenance.
When I used to take my son Jake over to play hockey at UMass Boston, when I'd park in the garage, I'd have to look up above and make sure this was an okay place to park, that a piece of the ceiling wasn't going to fall down on the roof of my car.
And that's scary. And these are places where we want to encourage, they're affordable, generally speaking, our state colleges and the university system. We want to keep them that way, but they also need to be state of the art and reflective of kind of what we're trying to achieve at these institutions of higher learning. So $2 billion, significant investment, and will help, I think, create jobs as well in terms of construction and stimulate payrolls. As to the MIFA issue, I mean, the governor and I were as concerned as you were when we first heard the word that MIFA was having difficulty. And your leadership in the Senate and making the case and prompting us to look, we thought the plan we put together made a lot of sense. As you know,
cost no tax dollars. Was a solid investment, and also the governor and you used the bully pulpit of your offices to prod the private universities and all the universities in Massachusetts to offer some of their credit to shore up these bonds, again, costing them nothing. I thought it was a great plan.
No, and because for those 40,000 individuals and families, these loans are critically important, and so we need to try to find solutions, and we're going to continue to talk and offer ideas, because Massachusetts, perhaps more than any other state, intellectual capital, innovation, well-trained, well-educated workforce
Absolutely.
is critical. And we have a responsibility in government to try to go the extra mile to make sure that that happens.
Absolutely. As we prepare these children to compete in a now global economy, they have to be better educated in order for them to sustain the superior standard of living. Two other things quickly on education. One, Chapter 70, the state aid to the local schools, it's up under this administration. Still never enough. It's never enough. And then finally, on Randolph, the largest town in my district, I truly appreciate the efforts of your administration, the Secretary of Education, a new position, the Commissioner, stepping in to partner with local officials in Randolph to really turn around those schools. And we have some very good things happening there as a result of the partnership with the state.
Yeah, in Chapter 70, many cities and towns and school districts, when you factor in inflation, are still not back to where they were back from the 2002, 9C cuts. And, while we've made progress together with the House and Senate, we've got to do more. The Readiness Project, the governor enrolled, has got a finance committee, commission, which is going to be making some recommendations to the governor, the House and Senate in November, parts of which we may bake into our budget, present to you as well, because we need to find some additional dollars to make some of those communities whole. Second piece, I've known Paul Revel since I was in high school, our Secretary of Education, and someone who believes fundamentally in public education, believes in collaboration, about bringing people together, parents, teachers, administrators, people in government, and in the private sector.
But also not afraid to shake things up a little bit, which I like.
He totally gets it. And,
Yeah.
and one of his hires, or our hires, was Mitch Chester, the Commissioner of Education, and at your request have been willing to sit down. And it's a partnership with superintendents, with principals, with local officials to say, this is not, too much. I think the frustration many of us who had in local government and school committees that, the previous Board of Ed and maybe some, it was kind of a top-down. You should be doing this rather than how can we help you get to better end results for your kids in your community. And that's what we're trying to change in the corner office.
Now it's much more collaborative. Finally, veterans. Now we've just had a couple of tragedies.
In Mashpee.
Young boys in Mashpee killed in Iraq just in the last week. And you've done some great things for veterans. Talk a little bit about what we're doing in Massachusetts for veterans, where I think we afford the greatest benefits of any state in the union.
Massachusetts takes a lot of hits politically, and I think the 2004 election, to some extent, it was exemplified that. But when you look and do the analysis of states around the country and what they are able to do for their veterans in terms of providing programs and benefits that they've been earned, that those veterans and their families have earned, Massachusetts is tops in the nation. And that's because a lot of people, Democrats, Republican, Independents, over the years have worked together with local officials who as well. And we've got a new challenge today with what's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan and the war and terror, a whole new set of challenges by today's veterans and their families. And the governor, in June of '07, reestablished the Governor's Advisory Committee on Veteran Services, which had last been really active since when Mike Dukakis was governor. We reconstituted that. We've been working, putting together a series of recommendations, trying to understand how in the executive branch and in our secretariats we can be more responsive, and making some progress in that regard, because, as I said, these veterans today who answered the call, none more, none more supreme in terms of the sacrifice than these two most recently in Mashpee, these two young men who gave their lives. I mean, we need to be meeting their needs, their family needs, for those that come back, the whole new wounded warrior, PTSD and TBI. It's an opportunity for us to use our medical delivery system to try to meet some of these needs, and that's what we're working on, and enjoy the work. And
you're doing a great job. By all accounts, you've exhibited some great leadership there. Now, I was given the 2-minute warning about 5 minutes ago, but I still want to hit you politically. Now, we had the governor, I told you, he announced his candidacy for governor on that very couch. God is my witness. That was about 2.5 years ago. Will Deval Patrick serve out this term if Barack Obama is elected President of the United States?
Yes, he will.
And he'll stand for re-election?
He'll stand for re-election.
Will you stand for re-election as Lieutenant Governor?
And I will be standing for re-election as Lieutenant Governor.
All right. And then,
keep the momentum going.
All right. My prediction, second term, he runs, second term, goes to Washington, you become our governor. All good, all good.
I think he's going to do 2 full terms.
I see. See, we can cut that out right there. Tim Murray, great to have you here, our Lieutenant Governor. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brian.
All right.
Thanks.